Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about Eden Zero, chapter 110. Alright, cool. So, here's what's up. I also did chapter 109 and I have uploaded that along with this video. Unfortunately, I couldn't upload it sooner, so that's just a little bit unfortunate. But whatever, we're here now for chapter 110. And just with the things going on in 110, there's still like, if you saw 109, I'm going to assume that you also saw chapter 109, my video for it. There's still some like weird little things going on with the terminology, but I think that's just an issue with the translation. But there was something in the chapter that I was really happy to see because it was something that came off of chapter 109. And just to like very quickly talk about that, in 109 I made a point about this song that Laguna was singing in his little musical, and I thought, well, this is going to be kind of reflected in Nadia because we knew she had something going on with Andrew. And then we come into this chapter and you see a lot of the same rhetoric from the song and to this. You see Laguna, I guess you see Nadia, sorry, in this chapter saying that she's going to wait, that there was a promise. And again, when you compare it to the song that Laguna has and he was singing, the rhetoric there, I wouldn't be surprised if something later on happens, like Nadia knows the song that Laguna was singing kind of thing, and then, you know, there's a little bit of commonality. The fact of the matter is that song did reflect Nadia's current situation to some degree. So it was kind of interesting to see that parallel between them, and I am curious as to whether or not Laguna is going to be involved in Nadia's rhetoric in any which way. Anyway, Eden Zero, chapter 110. Let's get talking about it proper. So how this is going to go, I'm going to go through the pages, and at any point that I think is worth talking about, I'm going to talk about it. So page 1 is just the regular reestablishing page, and then we go into page 2 where Rebecca is finding out more about what exactly happened in this city. Now, this is where things get interesting because Nadia in this page begins by saying there is a certain treasure guarded by this land and worshipped since ancient times. So keep in mind the ancient times. At that point, we go into seeing the various murals. And one thing I want to say is that one of these murals, I didn't say it for 109, but one of these murals has this little ball here. And I'm just looking at that ball and I'm thinking, might that be like an embryo? Like, I know Mother is there on this one, but could that little ball be Shiki inside of it? You know, I wouldn't be surprised. Oops. Wouldn't be surprised. It's just very interesting. It looks like a cell cluster to me, but who knows what that could really be. Anyway, point is, since ancient times, people have been visiting the temple. Nadia tells us that that's what people have been doing for a very long time in the past. If you look at the mural, there doesn't seem to be any other big little, there doesn't seem to be any other big details other than maybe this place wasn't underwater. Anyway, the important thing here is that Nadia tells us that the treasure was stolen 200 years ago. And when I saw that, that kind of like made me raise my eyebrow just a little bit because things get kind of weird there. Because 200 years ago, the thing was stolen. This thing has been there since ancient times. But also, 200 years ago is when Nadia was built. So it's a very interesting timeline. It's very interesting that the time that the thing gets stolen correlates to the time that Nadia was built. Now, mind you, I assume when they say 200 years, to give it some leeway, I assume maybe 200 means 204, 203, 202, 201. Anything that could reasonably be rounded down to be 200, you know, I feel like that could be used here. But it is very interesting that the time that Nadia is built, that's when we have someone stealing it after, according to Nadia's words, since ancient times they've had this thing without being stolen. That's really odd. Anyway, that also tells us that Ziggy wasn't the one that stole it, not that I thought he did. Anyway, after that we go into page 5 where we find out that the ether from this treasure kept the androids powered up. And we also find out that Nadia's cable isn't something that was with her from Jump Street. So in chapter 109, I thought that the cable was the big thing that separated the androids, but now we find out, no, not really. So even though Nadia is telling us she's an old model, maybe like you can kind of see it in like the way she's formed. Like honestly, she looks more sophisticated than anything else. But yeah, it was interesting. Like Nadia seems, despite being a 200-year-old model, she seems relatively advanced. Anyway, through page 5, we find out Andrew was a mischievous guy who loved Nadia, apparently. And was the one who was conducting maintenance on the droids, which is kind of interesting because that's similar to Shiki's situation. Like I feel like if Andrew gets to come back through some weird time shenanigan, Shiki will have some level of commonality with him. Anyway, on page 6 we have the very cute moment of Nadia being in love with that guy, and we find out what exactly happened to Andrew, that being that he left the world to go find the treasure. So that's very interesting. I don't know, like, how does that lead to him being in the atmosphere and him falling out of the sky so easily? That's the big question. It's kind of odd, right? The timing of everything is really odd. Anyway, by page 6 and 7, you understand that there was a promise that was made. Nadia's been waiting for a very long time, and again, waiting, that's a very interesting rhetoric to have when you know the song. And then we go into page 8, and what I found interesting on page 8 was that Nadia had clenched her fist as she was talking about a promise, which to me might either indicate anger, although I don't think she's an angry person, but it might indicate some level of frustration or worry, right? Like that is an anxious tell. So she is it might just indicate that she is a little bit fearful on the inside. Like when she's saying that he promised that he would come back and she believes in him, this might be a situation where she's aware of the fact that people can't live more than 200 years, and she's like very, very courageously holding on to that promise. Like she's hoping for some kind of weird thing to happen, kind of thing. Anyway, Laguna and Witch later show up. Witch again, still in her outfit. I'm sure that all the Eden Zero fans love any shot of Witch. But Laguna shows up, and very interestingly, Laguna comes in wearing a jumpsuit or like, I don't know, a bathing suit, a diving suit with the Elemental 4 logo on it, the E4 logo. And it's just really interesting. This is one of the first things that tell you that Laguna is still kind of riding Draken Joe. It's very interesting the way he was framed in this. Like, it's a very bold move to come up to the guys that have an issue with your boss wearing his logo, right? That's a very bold move. Anyway, through this we find out that there is one condition that Laguna asked for, so it must be something within Witch's power. Don't know what that could be. Maybe it's like to just take Laguna somewhere else, who knows. Anyway, through this page we have Laguna doing some interesting defense of Draken Joe and their position. So it was interesting to find out that Draken Joe kept around the Elemental 4 because they kept his own ether in check. So that was very interesting to know that Laguna didn't know that Draken Joe was also old. But regardless, this finding out that this was the thing, that they were there as safeguards for Joe, that does make things a lot more interesting. It kind of changes the dynamics a little bit. So they were all useful, or they were all necessary for him, but he also still exerted weird pressure on people like Clean. It's very interesting, all things considered. Anyway, Laguna keeps on his defense of Joe and his bringing down of Shiki's accomplishments, and he keeps this going for the rest of the chapter. So in the chapter, you do see a little bit of an arc where Laguna starts really frosty and slowly gets better, or slowly warms up to Shiki. But one of the interesting lines is where he says, you cut him off from the elements and you destroyed his life support device. That's how you beat him. The boss, and that's a big thing, calling him the boss still like indicates the appreciation towards Joe. Draken wasn't at full strength. So what's important here is that, this is kind of like, this is stupid excuses. I don't care if he's saying this. Look, the reality is, if you have a boss character, you either are super strong or you're super stupid if you think you shouldn't take out the things that empower him. If Draken Joe's power is allowed by outside factors, it only makes sense to go after his outside factors if they are less protected than he is. That's just video game logic as well. Laguna's bringing this up as a point of pride, trying to say like, oh yeah, no, Draken's like super powerful like when he's at full power, but it's like, nah, man. If his weaknesses are that he has factors that are keeping him going outside of his body, that's part of his power. Attacking those things is only the smart thing to do. No one should be fighting Draken Joe at full strength unless they are as strong as him already, or unless they're stupid. So this was just very interesting kind of rhetoric. Again, like everyth's part of the power set. The life support device is part of his power. Take it out if you want to take him out. But that was just the rhetoric from someone that lost and someone that clearly still likes him. It's like if you're fighting a swordsman, you knock and like the sword is what's giving him all his dangerous power. You knock the sword out of his hand. There's no need to go into like this whole honorable battle of fighting someone at full strength. Anyway, Laguna like points out that he does know about Cat Leaper, or he at least knows what Draken Joe was coming or was going on about, or what he was going after. And then on page 13, you still have the frosty nature going on with specifically Laguna not believing that Shiki could beat Draken Joe. And so again, the author made a very big choice. He was very consistent with characterizing Laguna for this chapter, which is really interesting that he came in with such an aggressive characterization for this one. Anyway, the other interesting thing that we have in page 13 is that Witch thinks about the fact that Ziggy didn't bring the 4 shining stars, which is really interesting. What is it that, for what reason would he not bring them along just to check this out? It does seem like there was some more stuff going on in the background. It'd be very interesting if Ziggy was fighting something dark from like the entirety of his existence. Anyway, the next little bit in Red Cave, we have just some shenanigans going on with Witch and all the kind of things about being nude. And we get a really cute little segment where Witch realizes she has her face exposed. It's really funny. She's talking about the shame of having the face exposed compared to skin. And it's like, oh, that like, look, when Laguna says it's kind of cute, I agree. It is kind of cute. Any hoosers, we find out the main plan is going to be turn Shiki into water. And then Thingamajig is going to coat him. And then we're good to go. So honestly, I'm glad that it revolved around turning him into water. It's just very interesting. It was a very interesting situation, and through the coding, Shiki can use his own powers. You know what? Being water is probably the thing that Witch required. I don't remember Witch's power set exactly, but I know it's revolving around elemental manipulation. So I think I think it checks out. You know, I would love to say like, oh, why didn't Shiki just use his gravity? But you know, Laguna also asked that question here too, so we also got the answer. So it seems like Mashima made a relatively tight solution, so I appreciate it. I respect that. Anyway, page 18 is critical because this is the one where Laguna's like, oh wow, he actually did it. So at that point, you can start to see that maybe this is where he's gonna start seeing Shiki in a better light. So now that we have Laguna's arc here, I feel like maybe by the end of Red Cave, Laguna will have appreciated Shiki more. Like that whole line about him just being a kid, you know, will probably change up. But for that to happen, it also requires some big conflict to occur. And honestly, when you have the situation with Andrew, when you have the fact that he just fell out of the sky, you could still squeeze some kind of interesting conflict out of all of this. Like Nadia is still going to be left behind. So it feels like we still got a little bit of drama to go through here. I'm very curious as to how this is going to escalate. Hopefully it won't be like a random villain shows up randomly. Anyway, the final pages are just showing what exactly the beacon is, and it's pretty much the ether of Mother that remains. So it's very interesting that Mother was once here, like a piece of her was once here. It's cool to see a shot of her and everything in the chapter. I'm very curious. So now it looks like if they're following the ether, according to what Mother is saying, it seems like from now on Shiki will be able to see this ether as he goes into the cosmos. So that's a pretty cool little upgrade if that's how it works. But yeah, overall very interesting. I do wonder what ultimately the treasure was, and now I understand. Like things, when you look at this part, my confusion in chapter 109 makes a lot more sense, right? The treasure is what radiated the ether, and the ether itself is what the beacon is. So that makes sense. They were in fact two things that were related. So overall, that was chapter 110. I think it's really interesting. Really, when I look in this chapter though, like my highlights for the chapter really are Witch's scenes. I know, I'm a simple guy. Like it was a cute scene. Witch's scenes were pretty good. I love Laguna's little character arc that he has going on. I love the commonality between the song in chapter 109 and Nadia's predicament. And I'm also extremely curious about what exactly is going on with the timeline here in terms of when Nadia was built, when the thing was stolen, and how long this thing was not stolen before Nadia was built. There's a lot of interesting things going on here. And then you have Andrew also being a little mischievous. I really hope it wasn't Andrew that stole the treasure because of some kind of weird power play. No, but that'd be too weird. But I don't know. I don't know if Mashima wants to be different with this or be extra. Anyway, guys, let me know what you thought down below. Let me know what you thought of Eden Zero Chapter 110. And until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.